Great. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from on our different streams, whether it's LinkedIn, Facebook, or YouTube. A very, very warm welcome. My name is Naadiya Moosajee. I'm the co-founder at WomHub and WomEng. And this evening, I have the absolute pleasure of introducing Bridget Fury, who's the interim head of the South African Future Trust, to our conversation this afternoon, evening. Well, first it's evening, but depending on where you are, whatever time zone it is. And so just a little bit about the South African Future Trust. It was established in 2020 as a part of a billion rand donation from the Oppenheimer Generation Foundation. And it was the year in which the world really changed. And so, Bridget, 2020 March rolls on. We go into hard lockdown. COVID strikes, and R1 billion is donated by the Oppenheimer Generations Foundation, and you all are mobilized almost instantaneously. So tell us a little bit about where this trust has come from, and just a little bit about the history.
Great. Well, thank you firstly for inviting me on this evening, and I'm really excited and happy to talk about the formation of the South African Future Trust. So as you say, in March of 2020, when I think everyone became suddenly aware that there was going to be a significant lockdown in South Africa, as it was around the world, and Oppenheimer and the Oppenheimer family that represents Oppenheimer Generations, so Nicky Oppenheimer, Jonathan, and his children, sat down and said that they really felt that they wanted to make a contribution to help small businesses that were going to be really badly affected by the lockdown. And so a recommendation was made to the foundation, and the R1 billion was donated. And then within the OpGen community, we rallied resources and individuals around to say, what should this entity look like? And so very quickly, we took a view that, as I say, small businesses would be the focus. But in particular, we wanted to ensure that employees of small businesses would be able to be supported in some way. And so after not very long time, about 5 or 6 days, we came up with a structure. So we set up a public benefit organization called the South African Future Trust, which has a 40-year lifespan. The idea is that it will be closed up by then. And we had huge support from government, of all aspects of government, to help us set up a public benefit organization in 5 days, basically during lockdown. And effectively, we agreed that there would be 2 phases of the South African Future Trust. The one directly to respond to COVID-19 and the lockdown, which was to offer interest-free loans to qualifying small businesses to enable their employees to be paid for 15 weeks. I guess we naively thought that this COVID pandemic would be over and done within 15 weeks. So unfortunately, that hasn't been the case. And I think, given what the title of this conversation today around partnership, I mean, the partnership with government was really important, but very much the partnership with the 6 big banks in South Africa, because they acted as our agents to qualifying SMMEs who were on their books and helped them to sign up. And the kind of neat thing about this is that the small business took on the debt on behalf of their employees, but the employees were actually paid directly. And so we tried to keep it as administratively light as possible. And if you can believe it, within approximately 35 days, we had committed the full R1 billion, and then the payments started to roll out over that 15-week period. So it was a busy time, and kind of all hands on deck, but sort of, certainly, very rewarding to be involved in it. So that was the first phase, and obviously that R1 billion has gone out. There's no requirement for businesses to pay that money back before the end of those 5 years, and it is interest-free. However, we are excited to see lots of those businesses starting to repay, because as the money comes back into the South African Future Trust, we can recycle it back out into helping small businesses. And so phase 2 kicked off, which is where our partnership with WomHub and other businesses that focus on entrepreneurs and on small businesses and supporting them came in. And that has been in the form of providing grant capital to businesses, to organizations helping small businesses in different guises. And I'm sure Naadiya can talk a little bit more about what WomHub is and its economic growth accelerator has done. But we do feel that there's some real, there's an incredible need and requirement to work with forward-thinking organizations who are in their particular ways supporting small businesses across different sectors. And so the South African Future Trust will continue to do that from now and into the next sort of 35, 40 years.
And then for me, Bridget, I think this is incredible because I think it's such a demonstration of the power of partnerships to mobilize really quickly. I mean, to set up a trust in 5, 6 days is probably unheard of. We'll take a step and, the focus on, SMMEs, on employees, and then in the next phase as well on ecosystem enablers for entrepreneurs. I mean, R1 billion could have been spent on anything. It could have been spent on, emergency clinics and vaccines and, food parcels. There were so many needs at that time. Why was this the priority and the focus area? Why is SMME so important for the South African Future Trust?
So I think in reality, we have a strong belief in Oppenheimer Generations of the importance of small businesses as the backbone of our economy. We also know that a lot of those small businesses sort of fall between the cracks in terms of ability to access funding. And we also knew that there was potentially some government funding available to people that weren't in employment. And so given the unemployment crisis in our country, we felt that if you could enable small businesses, which are huge employers of people, to be able to just get through the initial lockdown without having to let them go and could continue to operate, that we would save not only a number of jobs, but keep some food on the table for those employees who have relatively precarious lives, but also importantly, try and get the SMMEs back on track to do the important role that they play in society post the COVID lockdown crisis.
And I think that's absolutely incredible because, it's literally around kind of teaching people to fish rather than just kind of giving food parcels, which, we've proven not to be sustainable. So there's some comments coming through, from Zoe and Tombe who's saying, thank you for the opportunity. And Naomi to say, such a valuable contribution for so many people, and for us at WomHub, being selected as one of the partners for the South African Future Trust Phase 2, it's been an absolute privilege to look at specifically economic growth and run incubators to support 25 female founders, and in the first round, and another 25 in next year. So over the next 2 years, 50 female founders. And so we've got a specific focus on women because we believe that it's such an important catalyst for our economy, especially because when we start to look at the numbers, women are typically underrepresented in STEM industries, but actually bear quite a lot of the entrepreneurial burden in other sectors across the board. So they actually most entrepreneurial, but kind of have less of access. Why is this particular partnership so important to the South African Future Trust?
So I think you've sort of hit the nail on the head. When we extended loans through the banks to small businesses in the first phase, there was a requirement for those businesses to be banked, and so there was a degree of formalization that most of them had. And so when we were thinking about Phase 2, we really thought quite hard about how did we get to sectors, either sectors or categories of small businesses which may be less well supported, but that are equally or more important. And so in our portfolio of grantees, with WomHub being one, we were really focused on looking at young people, at people in environments where access to support was less available, and a big focus on women, because what we, I think, find in our work previously, and are certainly supported by research, is that often women-owned businesses are kind of the bedrock of many of the communities, yet they don't really have a great deal of visibility. So we were super excited, not only about WomHub's focus on women founders, but also on young women coming into the STEM industries, where we can see, potentially huge opportunities for innovation, but also for job creation and for economic growth. So it kind of ticked a whole range of boxes for us.
Oh, and we've got Khomutso, who is actually on Economic Growth Accelerator program online as well. And she's just posted a comment to say that she just wants to, give a first-hand testament to, she's had access to market like she's never had before, and kind of just wants to really share how deeply empowering the Economic Growth Accelerator program has been for her. But Bridget, what's been incredible is that there's the empowerment piece and the actual delivery on the ground and working with the founders, but kind of the engineer data person in me is getting really excited because through this process, the South African Future Trust is collecting a lot of data around entrepreneurship and trends. What are you seeing in the ecosystem? What's happening out there?
Sure. So it's very early days, and we are by no means experts. But what I think is going to be an interesting role for us going forward is to be able to be this kind of collector of information across the piece. And I think what's quite interesting is that even though there's a lot of talk and focus on small business, actually there's very little hard evidence and data that tells us, stuff that's useful. So we are running a kind of a constant learning journey alongside both our loan holder pool, which is 9,000 small businesses that we helped in the first phase, but also through our grant program with intermediaries. And I think, what's fascinating is that always the first thing that comes to mind, and often even with support organizations, the first thing they will say is it's an access to capital problem. And yet what we, I think, are gaining information and knowledge around is it's much more complex than that. It's about the right kind of capital, but into the right businesses at the right time. And so understanding, I think, disabusing ourselves of assumptions about how people want and use capital is very interesting. I think then there's the piece around trust, which I think is so interesting. I think we put money into organizations helping to support entrepreneurs, and some of the programs have kind of gone out to market, so to speak, with their entrepreneur target group, and they haven't had a great response from people. And sort of doing some digging, what we've started to uncover is that there's this sense of disbelief that there's actually genuine, constructive, supportive organizations that want to help small businesses. And so it's funny, I was talking to someone the other day, and they said, the thing about the South African Future Trust and the role that it can play is almost put trust back into the relationships between small businesses and the private sector or funders or government, because there's this deficit there. So, there are other things that we're learning along the way, but they're not the things that you would be typically expect to hear and learn. It's that building trust, building relationships, and actually responding to the needs of small business rather than making assumptions about what they need.
And I mean, it just brings us full circle back to, the theme of this particular conversation is this power of partnership, and exactly what you're saying is that the trust in partnership is been eroded along the way, and so how do we bring that back? Do you have some thoughts and ideas on how we put that back in from a partner perspective?
Yeah, so I mean, as you know, I wear two hats. So on the one hand, I work at Oppenheimer Generations Philanthropies, and we are mostly a funding organization, and we fund a number of partners. So as we do through the South African Future Trust with yourselves, I think the key is understanding the expectations of both partners and be very clear about what the roles and responsibilities are. And being very responsible about what you bring to a partnership. And I think particularly in the social investment space, which is where we operate, there's often this power dynamic that exists between the people with money and the people kind of receiving the money or support. And I think having a really conscious attitude around saying that everyone brings something to the party and we have to acknowledge that. So that for me is absolutely fundamental. The second thing about partnerships is, again, it goes back to trust, but brutal honesty, because things don't always go right. And I think one of the things that we're privileged to have in the South African Future Trust and through Oppenheimer Generations Philanthropies is a really high risk tolerance. So we want our partner organizations to take, to experiment, to try new things, to innovate. And we know that that's not always going to be successful, and that the path is not always going to be straight. And I think what you need then is that trust, but also the ability to say, okay, it hasn't gone according to plan. That's okay. What are we going to learn from that? And how are we going to remedy that and move that forward? So I think it's the expectations setting, and then that brutal honesty and the ability to be humble and have some humility around what you can and can't achieve on your own, and therefore needing the other partner to help on that journey.
And, I think that's incredible. And, what you're saying. And I think Koba, who's watching on Facebook Live, she said, good evening, very valuable insight. And Bridget, right on the money, just around how, it's around partnership, and that there are two parties that are actually bringing something to the table. And so, and a lot of the times our organizations go, but we're so small, and you're such a big organization, and there's so many, billions of dollars behind you. I'm sure you get hit up for money all the time, Bridget. But how can smaller entrepreneurs and entities approach, big philanthropic organizations? Kind of, what has been the best ways in which you've seen it being done effectively in terms of building relationships and partnerships?
Yeah, that is a tricky one, because the reality is that there is this assumption that there's all this money available, and that everyone who's got a great idea really deserves to get some, and they do in many instances. But I think what I think entrepreneurs need to understand is that actually money isn't the only thing that's needed, and therefore that's why there's such a huge need for organizations like yourselves and others to play that intermediary role, to say, to be able to say, okay, this is the funding, this is the capital requirement, these are the capital providers, and package it in a way that makes it easier for the decisions to be made. So we, for instance, don't do direct funding of individual businesses or individual entrepreneurs, much as we might like to, because we just don't have the resources to do that. So again, we rely on our partner organizations to either help them fund and build the ecosystem that enables more and more entrepreneurs to come to the fore, or help support them on their journey and guide them in the direction where they need to go to find the correct sources of funding, which may come from us or may come from other people.
Yeah. And I think that's the other thing is people need to start doing their homework, right? And understand that it's not always capital. Not everybody who asks for money has money. But, I always find, and what's so valuable is that the people that I meet, it's not just about funding, but actually kind of that brain trust. I think we learn so much when we engage with people and have conversations and networks, and understanding that that person may not help you, but don't dismiss them because they can't write a check, because they could be exceptionally influential and connect you to different people who could open up other opportunities for you.
Absolutely.
So we've got Elizabeth, who is on LinkedIn, who is saying absolutely true, Bridget. They said there's lots of love for you here online, rightly so. For some of the comments that you're making, people very much aligned to what you're saying. So we've got another comment here from Pranola, and she says, very valuable information. Can you possibly inform where these funding opportunities are advertised or accessed?
Sure. So, currently, the way in which we go about building out our partnerships and our funding relationship tends to be very proactive. So we don't, unfortunately, accept people coming to us to ask for funding, but rather, I think there are a number of programs that we are currently funding, including WomHub, including a program on the circular economy and businesses in that space. We're doing some work with young people in townships looking at the digital economy. So I would suggest you can have a look on the South African Future Trust website to see some of the partner organizations we work with, and they in turn are advertising the various programs that they are running on our behalf and others' behalf. And you could have a look there to see whether you're a good fit to join a program or an accelerator program, or indeed apply for some of the funding which is available. So South African Future Trust website, which I think, Naadiya, you're going to share a link to later on, is probably the first good port of call for our funding. But obviously there is funding available in many other guises, from government through to the private sector. So to Naadiya's point, I think just doing one's homework and just doing a bit of scouting around is really a useful exercise to find the right type of support for yourself or your business at the right time.
And for those of you online, actually, you'll see at the bottom of your screens now, I've actually just popped the banner for SouthAfricanFutureTrust.org. Well, I'll show it again at the end so that we can that you can catch it. But it's a goldmine of information. Yolanda is also on LinkedIn. She's joining us, and she's also saying, very valuable information, Bridget. She's forever grateful for the opportunities that WomHub has afforded, and especially for, she's giving a shout out to me. So Naadiya, thank you for the vision, quite impactful. But I think, for me, there's vision, and it's important to have that vision, but it's also very important to have partnerships, because vision in a nutshell doesn't actually achieve anything unless you have those kind of key mechanisms that make it work. And so, Bridget, if I think about just you and your team as well, you've got incredible vision, but you've got all these key mechanisms that will make us work. So what are the cogs in the system that is really working for you guys? And if you can just share some of that insight with us.
Yeah, sure. Again, I think it's I call it ruthless pragmatism. I think that we're in a fortunate position to have some capital to deploy, and we're doing that. But I think it's also just getting kind of down and dirty with whether it was with when we set up the South African Future Trust, actually just trying to get the work done and get the loans out and fix the loan management system. Actually being very comfortable in getting stuck into the detail. And then again, just, with our partner organizations, going on the journey along with them. So it's not really a mechanism, but just to say, we are here as a sounding board. We have the privilege of being able to talk to a range of different organizations all the time. And so we're very happy to be able to impart advice or knowledge that we might have picked up along the way, or indeed introductions to other funders or other practitioners who are doing similar things. I think one of the things that I find very frustrating in the funding space is so often there is duplication of resources. And so 2 or 3 organizations might be doing exactly the same thing. And so you have a bunch of really good organizations trying to raise money or to implement a project, but they're kind of competing with one another. And so a lot of what we try to do is say, have you thought about working alongside somebody else? They've tried that and it hasn't worked, or it's worked really well in a particular geography. So can you try and do that somewhere else? So I think that knowledge generation and sharing is very much part of how we see our remit. And then that, and then there's a degree of thought leadership that can come out of that, where we can spend some time thinking about what are the lessons learned, build up evidence bases, go out and talk to people, dare I say, even to government sometimes, to say some of the things that we think maybe work better. So using it as a sounding board, a collaboration partner, thought leadership, but being very happy to be very practical, and kind of nuts and bolts about, why is something working, why is it not working, and bringing our kind of intellect to the problem and hoping that we might be able to make some sort of contribution.
And what you guys are doing, it's so incredible. And so I always ask this because I'm always interested. If you had a magic wand, Bridget, what is it that you would do with this magic wand? What would you wish for? What's kind of the end game? What's utopia look like?
Oh, goodness me. I don't know. I think that ruthless pragmatism keeps me far away from magic wands. But I think at the root of all of the work that I believe fundamentally in is giving access to individuals to assets in order for them to find their own potential. So, if you can remove blockages for people to be able to do the stuff that they want to do and they can do, that is utopia. Because actually we've got talent, we've got brilliant young people, and the big problem is they just don't necessarily have that access to whatever it takes for them to get to their true potential. So I think if we can unlock that potential somehow and remove some of those obstacles, that would be utopia.
Oh, no, fantastic. I think that's always the biggest barrier, right? And I think from the conversations that we've been having throughout the last, 25 minutes, and we kind of, hurtling to a close so quickly, this conversation I always feel is always too short with the time spent with you, Bridget. But, as we close out, anything that you'd like our audience to, any parting shots that you'd like to leave the audience with, or any pearls of wisdom to share just around the partnerships, around anything, but
Sure.
around kind of unlocking the ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe not so much to unlocking the ecosystem, but just to some of the entrepreneurs that may be on this call. I'm not an entrepreneur, so I just know from having worked alongside and having some sight of entrepreneurs, it's incredibly, incredibly difficult. And so I guess I would say just continue to believe that it's possible, and display the sort of resilience that you have, because without entrepreneurs innovating, without entrepreneurs creating workarounds, without entrepreneurs sticking to it, we will not have the sort of future that we need in this country, on this continent. So, just keep at it and keep doing hard things, because that's what we need.
I absolutely love that. Keep doing hard things, right? And I just want to say, on behalf of WomHub, who is a real proud partner of the South African Future Trust, we would like to just say on the bottom of our heart, thank you so much for not just the funding, but the council and the vision that you've brought to the space. Pranola is saying, what an inspiration you are, Bridget, and she's very grateful for your insight this evening. And I echo everything Pranola is saying. She's joined us on Facebook Live, and so if people would like to find out a little bit more about the South African Future Trust, it's southafricanfuturetrust.org. We've got some more thanks to say. Thanks for the encouraging words. The entrepreneurial journey is lonely. And so just being there and as an organization and an entity to support entrepreneurs and help to actually unblock those blockages in the ecosystem is incredibly helpful. So southafricanfuturetrust.org. And then, we're really excited because we have just gotten a cohort that has gone through our first economic growth accelerator that is being powered by the South African Future Trust. 25 female founders across STEM businesses in South Africa. And they have been pitching over the last kind of 2 weeks. We've got a founder showcase that is happening on Thursday at our hub in Johannesburg, and it will be their final pitch off between both our economic growth accelerator cohort as well as our circular economy cohort. So if you would like to find out a little bit more around the incubators, the accelerators that we run, where you can access funding was one of the other questions. WomHub is the place to ask all these questions because we are building the entire ecosystem for women in STEM, not just in South Africa, but in Africa as well. And so that means that we are supporting female founders through partnerships like the South African Future Trust. We are funding female founders through a number of funding mechanisms, including a venture capital fund called 535 Ventures that invested in seed and Series A female founder businesses across the continent. And so if you want to know more, WomHub.com is where you want to go to find out all of this information. Bridget, thank you so much for the conversation, for the insights, and the encouragement, and just the vision that you and your team have in leading the South African Future Trust in a way that probably very few do.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And just to say that we absolutely love working with WomHub, with Naadiya and Hema and Ange and the team. And we're just delighted to be on this journey with you. So thank you for everybody for coming along and listening.
Great. Thanks, everyone. That is us for this evening. If you want to know more, WomHub.com, South African Future Trust. Thanks to everybody for tuning in, and we will catch you on the next broadcast. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.